Jerusalem is tiny, not a continent, not an empire, not a superpower, just a city on a hill, smaller than many modern suburbs. You could walk across the old city in less than an hour. Its ancient walls enclose barely 1 square kilometer. And yet, for thousands of years, the most powerful kings, empires, and religions on earth have been obsessed with it. Some came to claim it. Some came to conquer it. Some came to rename it. Some came to destroy it. And many came convinced that owning Jerusalem meant owning history itself. Think about that for a moment. This is not Rome, which ruled the ancient world. This is not Constantinople, gateway between continents. This is not Beijing or London or Paris, cities that commanded vast empires and shaped global politics. This is a small city in a small land, perched on hills with no major river, no natural harbor, no obvious strategic advantage. And yet more wars have been fought over Jerusalem than almost any place on earth. More prayers have been directed toward it. More tears have been shed for it. More blood has been spilled in its streets. So here's the real question. Why does the whole world want this tiny city? Why has Jerusalem been fought over more than almost any place on earth? Why does it sit at the center of Judaism and also become sacred to Christianity and Islam? And why does the battle over Jerusalem never truly end? Today, we're telling the full story, ancient, medieval, and modern, so you finally understand why this one city can shake the world. If you love Jewish stories, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. Let's begin. Before Israel, the ancient city. Jerusalem is so old that it existed before Israel became a nation. Archaeological evidence suggests the site was inhabited as early as 4,500 BCE, over 6,000 years ago. Long before Abraham, long before Moses, long before David. In the ancient world, the city was associated with Canaanite culture. Early references in Egyptian texts from around 1900 BCE mention a place called Ru-Salamim. The name likely means foundation of Shalem, Shalem being a Canaanite deity associated with dusk or peace. So even in its earliest days, Jerusalem carried a spiritual dimension. It was not just a settlement. It was a place people associated with the divine. But what makes Jerusalem unique is not just age. Many ancient cities are old. What makes Jerusalem extraordinary is what happens when Israel's story touches this city, and the city becomes more than real estate. It becomes identity. And the moment that transformation begins is with one name, King David. David's genius, creating a capital. Before David, Israel was a collection of tribes. After the Exodus, after the wandering, after the conquest of Canaan, the Israelites settled into their tribal territories. Reuben here, Judah there, Ephraim in the hills, Dan near the coast, Benjamin squeezed between. And like most tribal societies, Israel had a problem. Every tribe had its own territory, its own pride, its own rivalries, its own tensions. The first king, Saul, came from the tribe of Benjamin, a small tribe. His capital was in his tribal territory. His leadership was always contested, always fragile. When David rises to power, he inherits this fractured landscape. He is from Judah, the largest and most powerful tribe in the south, and that is exactly the problem. If he rules from a Judahite city, the northern tribes will always see him as their guy, not our king. So David does something genius. He conquers a city that was not strongly tied to any one tribe, a neutral stronghold held by the Jebusites, a Canaanite group that had never been fully displaced. He takes it with his own men, his own army, not with tribal forces that would claim credit. He makes it the capital. That city becomes Jerusalem, the city of David, the political heart of united Israel. Why did this matter so much? Because a capital is not just where leaders sit. A capital is where national identity gets built. It is where power concentrates. It is where people look for direction. By choosing a neutral city, one that belonged to no tribe but now belonged to the king, David created a symbol of unity. Jerusalem became everyone's city precisely because it had been no one's city. This was political genius of the highest order, and once Jerusalem becomes the capital, something even bigger happens next. It becomes the spiritual center. Solomon's temple, the city, becomes sacred. David wanted to build a temple in Jerusalem, a permanent house for the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tablets of the law given at Sinai. But according to the biblical narrative, God tells David, no. David has been a man of war, a man who shed blood. The temple will be built by his son. That son is Solomon. David's son, King Solomon, builds the first temple, one of the most magnificent structures of the ancient world. It takes 7 years to complete. Cedar from Lebanon, gold overlaying the inner sanctuary, elaborate carvings, a priesthood to serve, a system of sacrifices to maintain. That changes everything, because now Jerusalem is not only a political capital, it becomes the home of the most sacred institution in the Israelite world. The temple becomes the center of worship, the only legitimate place for certain sacrifices. The destination of pilgrimage, 3 times a year, Israelite societies traveled to Jerusalem. The repository of national memory, the Ark, the tablets, the presence of God. And once the temple is built, Jerusalem gains a power that goes beyond armies. Symbolic power. That is when the city becomes irresistible. Empires do not only conquer land, they conquer symbols. They capture cities not just for resources, but for legitimacy. They want to own the places that matter to people's hearts. And Jerusalem, small, rocky, waterless Jerusalem, becomes the greatest symbol in the region, the city where God dwells, the city between giants, why empires couldn't ignore it. Geography matters. Look at a map of the ancient Near East, and you will see something striking. The land of Israel sits in a narrow corridor between 2 massive power centers. To the southwest, Egypt, ancient and wealthy. To the northeast, Mesopotamia, first Assyria, then Babylon, then Persia. Between them was a thin strip of land along the Mediterranean coast and the Jordan Valley. This corridor was the highway of the ancient world. Trade routes passed through it. Armies marched through it. Whoever controlled this land controlled the connection between civilizations. That's why one empire after another arrives at Jerusalem's gates. Assyria, the brutal military machine of the ancient world, conquered the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE and scattered its 10 tribes into history. Babylon, which rose to dominate Mesopotamia, turned its eyes toward Judah. Persia, which conquered Babylon, became the largest empire the world had yet seen. Greece, under Alexander the Great, swept across the known world, bringing not just armies, but an entire civilization. Rome, the ultimate ancient superpower, would rule the Mediterranean for centuries. Every time the regional balance of power shifts, Jerusalem becomes a prize. Not because it is strategically essential, it is actually off the main coastal route, but because it is symbolically essential. Conquering Jerusalem means conquering the God of Israel. It means humiliating a people. It means demonstrating supreme power. And no conquest proves more devastating than Babylon. Babylon, the first destruction. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II conquers Jerusalem. This is not just a military defeat. It is trauma. The first temple, Solomon's temple, which stood for nearly 400 years, is destroyed, burned, demolished. The sacred vessels are carried off to Babylon as trophies. The elites of Judah, the royal family, The priests, the scribes, the craftsmen are deported, exiled to Babylon, hundreds of miles from their homeland. The city is humiliated. The walls are torn down. The population is scattered. This moment is so painful that it becomes part of Jewish memory forever. The Book of Lamentations weeps over Jerusalem's destruction. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow has she become, she who was great among the nations. The Psalms cry out by the rivers of Babylon. There we sat down. Yes, we wept when we remembered Zion. But here is what makes Jewish history different from so many other conquered peoples. Jerusalem falls, yet Jewish identity does not vanish. Most peoples, when their capital is destroyed, their temple burned, and their leaders exiled, disappear. They assimilate. They become absorbed into the conquering empire, not the Jews. Exile forces a transformation. Without a temple, Judaism becomes more portable. Synagogues emerge as gathering places. Study becomes central. Prayer replaces sacrifice. Law becomes the framework of identity. This means Jerusalem becomes sacred, not only as a location, but as an idea. You could be in Babylon, 1,000 miles from Zion, and still orient your prayers toward Jerusalem. Still remember it. Still long for it. Still weep for it. And then history takes another shocking turn. A foreign empire helps rebuild Jerusalem. Persia, the Return, and the Second Temple. In 539 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. And Cyrus did something unprecedented. He issued a decree allowing the Jewish exiles to return to their land and rebuild their temple. This is so remarkable that the Hebrew Bible calls Cyrus God's anointed, using the Hebrew word Mashiach for a foreign king. Under Persian rule, the Jewish people returned to Jerusalem. The city was rebuilt. The walls went up again. And most importantly, the Second Temple rose. It was not as grand as Solomon's temple. The elders who remembered the First Temple wept when they saw it. Whether from joy or sorrow, the text does not make clear. But it was a temple. Jerusalem became a living center again. This era became known as Second Temple Judaism, a period lasting over 500 years where Jewish life expanded, diversified, and became deeply defined. New texts were written, new traditions developed, new questions emerged. But even with a temple again, Jerusalem was not safe, because now a new force arrived. Not just an empire, a civilization. One that did not only conquer with swords, it conquered with ideas. Greece, the battle for the soul. When Alexander the Great swept through the region in 332 BCE, he brought more than armies. He brought Hellenism, Greek culture, Greek philosophy, Greek language, Greek ways of thinking. After Alexander's death, his empire fractured. The land of Israel eventually fell under the Seleucid dynasty based in Syria. And now the challenge was not only political, it was cultural. Hellenization was a pressure, sometimes subtle, sometimes forced, to adopt Greek ways. Greek gymnasiums, Greek education, Greek gods, Greek identity. Some Jews embraced Hellenism enthusiastically, seeing it as sophisticated and modern. Others resisted fiercely, seeing it as a betrayal of everything their ancestors preserved through exile. Jerusalem became a battlefield of culture. Would the city remain the heart of Judaism or become just another Greek-style polis? This tension exploded in the 160s BCE when the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, desecrated the temple, banned Jewish practice, and attempted to forcibly Hellenize the population. The result was the Maccabean Revolt, a guerrilla uprising that somehow succeeded against the mighty Seleucid army. The temple was rededicated. This event is commemorated every year as Hanukkah. The Hasmonean dynasty that followed ruled an independent Jewish state for about a century. the first since the Babylonian conquest. But independence did not last, because the next empire was even more powerful. And when it came, Jerusalem became the most dangerous place on earth. Rome, the second destruction. Rome takes control of Judea in 63 BCE. At first, Jewish kings continued to rule as Roman clients. Herod the Great rebuilds the temple on a massive scale, one of the most impressive building projects in the ancient world. The Temple Mount is expanded. The temple itself becomes a wonder, but Rome does not tolerate resistance. Tensions rise over generations. Crushing taxes, Roman governors who do not understand or respect Jewish sensibilities, religious tensions, zealot movements, messianic expectations. Jerusalem becomes a powder keg. Then it explodes. In 66 CE, the Great Jewish Revolt begins. For 4 years, Jews fight Rome, the greatest military power the world has ever seen. Rome responds with overwhelming force. In 70 CE, the legions under Titus breach the walls of Jerusalem. The temple, Herod's magnificent temple, the center of Jewish worship for over 500 years, is burned to the ground. This is not just a building falling. This is a cosmic wound in Jewish history. The destruction of the Second Temple reshapes everything. Judaism must transform or die. Without a temple, without sacrifices, without a functioning priesthood, what does it mean to be Jewish? The rabbis answer that question over the following centuries, creating the Judaism that exists today. But Rome isn't finished. 60 years later, another revolt, the Bar Kokhba revolt, from 132 to 135 CE. This time, Rome crushes it even harder. Jerusalem is razed. Jews are banned from the city. The city is renamed Aelia Capitolina. The province is renamed Syria Palestina, deliberately erasing the Jewish connection. What Rome wants is simple: erase the center, break the identity, scatter the people. But again, history does not go the way Rome expects, because while Jerusalem is devastated, Jewish life adapts. Academies move to the Galilee and later to Babylon. The Talmud is compiled. Traditions are codified. Communities survive. And Jerusalem becomes even more powerful as an eternal idea. Every prayer faces Jerusalem. Every Passover ends with the line, "Next year in Jerusalem." Every Jewish wedding breaks a glass to remember the temple's destruction. Jerusalem is gone, and yet more present than ever. If you love Jewish stories, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. Christianity and Islam, the city becomes global. Here's where the story expands beyond Judaism. Jerusalem becomes sacred to Christianity because of Jesus. According to Christian tradition, Jesus taught in Jerusalem. He was crucified just outside its walls. He was buried nearby. And most importantly for Christians, he rose from the dead in Jerusalem. The sites associated with these events become the most sacred places in Christendom. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to be built over the sites of crucifixion and resurrection. The Via Dolorosa, the path Jesus walked carrying his cross. The Mount of Olives, associated with his ascension. When the Roman Empire becomes Christian under Constantine in the 4th century, Jerusalem is transformed. Churches are built. Pilgrims arrive from across the empire. The city becomes a Christian holy city. And then, in the 7th century, another transformation. Islam emerges in Arabia. Within decades, Muslim armies conquer a vast territory, including Jerusalem, in 638 CE. Jerusalem becomes sacred to Islam because of the night journey, the tradition that the Prophet Muhammad traveled from Mecca to the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, and then ascended to heaven from that spot. The Dome of the Rock is built on the Temple Mount, one of the oldest and most beautiful Islamic structures in the world. Now Jerusalem is no longer sacred to one people. It becomes sacred to billions. Three faiths, one city, overlapping holy sites, competing claims. And when three global religions revere the same city, that city becomes the most contested spiritual real estate on earth. That's when every empire begins to see Jerusalem as more than a city. They see it as legitimacy, prophecy, identity, global influence. The Crusades, a holy war for the Holy City. In 1095, Pope Urban II calls for a crusade. The stated goal is to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim control and to secure access for Christian pilgrims. The result is centuries of bloodshed. The Crusades turn Jerusalem into a worldwide magnet of violence. This is not a local war. It is a global holy war. Armies march across continents, from France, from Germany, from England, from Italy, with one dream: take Jerusalem. In 1099, the First Crusade succeeds. Crusader armies breach the walls and massacre the inhabitants, Muslims, Jews, and Eastern Christians alike. The streets run with blood. A Crusader kingdom is established. Jerusalem becomes the capital of a Christian state in the heart of the Middle East. But it does not last. In 1187, the Muslim leader Saladin recaptures Jerusalem. Unlike the Crusaders, he spares the population. The city changes hands again and again. More crusades follow, more armies, more death. And the city's myth grows even bigger. Because the more blood is spilled for a place, the more people convince themselves it must be worth everything. Jerusalem becomes not just a city, but an idea that men will cross oceans to possess. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire conquered Jerusalem. For the next 400 years, Jerusalem remained under Ottoman control. This era was relatively stable compared to the Crusades, and the Ottomans maintained order. They rebuilt the walls. The current old city walls date to Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent in the 1530s and the 1540s. They allowed different religious communities to maintain their holy sites. Jews continued to live in Jerusalem, though often in poverty. The old Yishuv, the old Jewish community, maintained a presence, especially in the Jewish quarter of the Old City. But quietly, the modern world was forming. Nationalism rose in Europe. Modern identity politics emerged. Global empires expanded and competed. The Ottoman Empire began its long decline. In the early 20th century, the Ottoman grip ended. A new power arrived. The modern Jerusalem crisis began to form. British rule, the modern explosion. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses. The League of Nations grants Britain a mandate over Palestine. This era becomes charged with competing national movements. Zionism, the movement for Jewish national self-determination in the ancestral homeland, brings waves of Jewish immigrants. Arab nationalism, the movement for Arab independence and unity, views the same land as Arab. Both movements converge on Jerusalem. The British try to balance competing claims, and they largely fail. Tensions rise, violence erupts. The 1920s and the 1930s see riots and massacres. The 1940s bring World War, the Holocaust, and increasing desperation. In 1947, the United Nations proposes partitioning the land into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international city under United Nations administration. The Jews accept, the Arabs reject. When Israel declares independence in May 1948, 5 Arab armies invade. The war that follows leaves Jerusalem divided. West Jerusalem becomes part of Israel. East Jerusalem, including the Old City and its holy sites, falls under Jordanian control. For 19 years, Jews cannot access the Western Wall, the last remnant of the Temple complex. Then comes 1967. Modern Jerusalem, why the debate never ends. In the Six-Day War of June 1967, Israel captured East Jerusalem, reunifying the city under Israeli control for the first time in nearly 2,000 years. Israeli soldiers reached the Western Wall. The photograph of paratroopers gazing up at the ancient stones became one of the most iconic images in Jewish history. But reunification did not bring peace. In modern history, Jerusalem became one of the most politically sensitive cities on earth. Why? Because it is not just a city. It is Jewish historical memory, the city David made capital, where the temple stood, religious center, holy to three faiths, with sacred sites mere meters apart. National identity, claimed as capital by both Israelis and Palestinians. World faith symbol, watched by billions of Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Geopolitical pressure point, where regional conflicts intersect with global interests. It is a place where archaeology can become politics, where borders become theology, where history becomes negotiation. And because Jews have prayed toward Jerusalem for centuries, facing the city 3 times daily, mentioning it constantly in liturgy, breaking glasses at weddings to remember its destruction, the city remains central in Jewish consciousness in a way few outsiders fully understand. This is not nostalgia. It is living memory. Why the world wants this city. Let's simplify it. Jerusalem is wanted because it offers 6 kinds of power. 1. Spiritual power, sacred to billions, Jews, Christians, Muslims. The city of the temple, the city of Jesus, the city of the night journey. Whoever holds Jerusalem holds a piece of the divine. 2. Historical power, connected to ancient identity and legitimacy. Jerusalem's history is proof of connection, proof of belonging, proof of roots. 3. Symbolic power, the city of prophecy and memory. To control Jerusalem is to control a symbol that moves hearts. 4. Political power, a capital question that shapes regional realities. Where is Israel's capital? Where would a Palestinian capital be? These questions shake governments. 5. Cultural power, the heartbeat of traditions, texts, and holy sites. The Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, all within walking distance. 6. Global power. What happens in Jerusalem echoes worldwide. A change in policy here makes headlines in Washington, Moscow, Cairo, London, Tehran. That is why it is never just a city. It is a mirror. People see in Jerusalem what they believe the world should be. Their faith, their history, their destiny, and that is why they fight over it. Empires rose and fell: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Crusaders, the Ottomans, the British. Kings claimed it, armies marched for it, religions sanctified it, generations wept for it. And yet Jerusalem remains, still sacred, still contested, still powerful enough to make the world shake. Because Jerusalem is not only a location, it is a story of David dancing before the ark, of Solomon dedicating the temple, of prophets crying out for justice. It is a memory of destruction and exile, of weeping by foreign rivers, of longing that never faded. It is a promise of return, of redemption, of a future when peace will finally come to this city of peace that has known so little of it. It is a wound, still open after millennia, still painful, still bleeding. It is a crown, the city on a hill, the center of the world, the place where heaven and earth touch. And it is a reminder that history is never dead, especially not in this city. Every stone in Jerusalem has a story. Every street has witnessed triumph and tragedy. Every prayer offered here joins a chorus that has echoed for thousands of years. The prayer says, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy." Those words were written 2,500 years ago by Jews in Babylonian exile. They are still recited today. That is why the world wants Jerusalem, and that is why Jerusalem endures. If you love Jewish stories, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles and share this documentary. Shalom.